Hey y'all, it's Robin. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be wrapping up my fall TBR. If you missed my fall TBR, I will have that linked up in the cards and down below. But every single season I set a seasonal TBR to kind of direct my reading. I always need a list of books to pick from so that I know what to read next instead of just staring at my Kindle trying to figure out what the heck to pick up next. And every single season I put 10 books onto one of these TBRs, and then at the end of that season we come back and we wrap them up and see what I read, what I rated them. Traditionally, I end up completing just about every single book on this list. This is probably my worst season ever, both on rating as well as the number of them that I read. So first up is Archangels Resurrection by Nalini Singh. This is one of my most disappointing books of the entire year. This is book 15 in the Guild Hunter series. I have loved the series up until this point, and I've given the last couple of books like 4.5, 5 stars, and I ended up giving this one 2.5. I did not understand the point of this book. This has a kind of like side characters romance. Not in the last book, but in the book before. We kind of wrapped up the big plot that has taken us up until this point in the series. And then we got some side character romance in the last one. And this was another side character romance. But I didn't understand why we needed this one. This isn't a character that we've like been with for the whole series. This is a side character that got introduced pretty late in the game. It wasn't one that I had an attachment to. And I didn't understand what this did for the series and for the plot as a whole. This didn't give us any new information. This didn't advance the plot in any way. This didn't have that great of a romance in it, in my opinion. This had a romance between these two archangels, and archangels live for like centuries and millennia. They live forever. Because of that, these two characters have had romances throughout the centuries multiple times, and they go through essentially a life cycle of their romance. And so we're getting like the third or fourth iteration of their romance, and the whole time I just kept thinking that like they've done this before, so like why am I supposed to believe that it's going to end up any different than the last 3 or 4 times? And so I didn't enjoy this. I didn't enjoy the romance. I didn't think it brought anything to the series that the series needed. And so I was just left feeling super disappointed in this one. A definite not disappointment was Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This I gave 5 stars. I love this book. This is probably going to be one of my favorite books of the year. I absolutely adore this. Kennedy Ryan always kills it with her emotional romances, and this was no exception. I cried. I loved the second chance romance. This is following a divorced couple who went through something very, very traumatic in their marriage, and because of that they both suffered pretty intensely as individuals as well as a couple, and because of that they ended up splitting, but they do have 2 children together, so they are continuing to co-parent. And now it is a couple years later, and they are finally working through some of their own personal trauma, and as they are doing so they are kind of finding their way possibly back to each other, and it is their second chance romance. This deals so heavily with loss of a child and mental health and depression and anxiety, and it was so beautifully handled and done. And I felt like Kennedy Ryan took such care with these characters and themes, and my animals are going crazy, so sorry if you can hear all that in the background, but I loved this so much. This is actually topics that I normally find extremely triggering. The way that Kennedy Ryan ended up handling them was just so beautiful to me, and I loved every single second of this book. It is one that I want everyone to read because it is so important and beautifully done, and I loved the romance a whole lot. Unfortunately, we're getting all the 5 stars out of the way apparently, because next up is A Wilderness of Stars by Shea Earnshaw, and this is my 4th book by this author and my 3rd 5-star. I just love Shea Earnshaw's writing so much. It doesn't matter what age she writes in, which genre she writes in. I fall in love with her worlds and characters and writing every single time. There is just something so beautiful and lush about her writing that I can't help but love it. This one is a YA sci-fi, which is so far outside of my normal genre, but it was so well done. Her ability to plot a book and make you believe that you know exactly what story you're being told and where the story is going only to turn it on its head right at the end is absolutely fantastic. I have no idea if she's releasing anything in 2023, but I really hope she is, because I want more amazing books from her. Unfortunately, that is the last 5-star on this list, and it's pretty much all downhill from here. So we have Asteroid Parker, It Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake, which is another one of my most disappointing books of the year. I give this 3 stars. Part of my issue with this book is that coming off of Delilah, this did not live up to it, and it made it feel more disappointing. I loved Delilah so much, and it didn't hit the same way. I felt like this book was really heavy-handed. I felt like the characters weren't really well developed. I didn't feel like this had a very good driving plot to it. I felt like this book was rushed to be released, and because of that, it didn't end up hitting the same way. Like, I just didn't feel like this book had as much care go into it as Delilah did. I was just left feeling really bummed by this one. I didn't think that the romance was anything great. I didn't think that the writing was anything great. I didn't think that the way that Ashley Herring Blake handled the themes in here was anything great, which is tragic because this is the first book by Ashley Herring Blake that I haven't given 5 stars to, and it's really sad. Another disappointing sequel was A Restless Truth by Freya Marsk. I did not dislike this book. I gave this book 3.5 stars. Again, just, I loved book 1 so much. I've read it twice, and I gave it 5 stars both times, and this was a 3.5, which isn't a bad rating for me. That is a book that I legitimately like. But just, it coming off of that first book, man, it didn't live up to it. I didn't love the romance. This is like a historical mystery fantasy series, and this one in particular was set on a boat crossing from America to England, and the heroine is the sister of one of the heroes in book 1, and she is trying to solve the mystery of a murder on the ship, and she is getting the help from some magical people on the ship. And I loved that premise because of the scope of the plot in comparison to the smallness of the setting. It ended up feeling very repetitive. And so I felt like our characters were doing the same thing over and over and over again. And because of that, it felt like it dragged on. And then on top of that, I didn't think that the romance in this one was nearly as strong as in book 1, partly because we don't exactly get an HEA or HFN from this one. It's kind of left open-ended. And so I was left feeling a little bummed about it. I didn't totally buy into their relationship and connection. I have no idea if they're together now or not. But like, I did enjoy some of the friendships and interactions. And so I'm really hoping that one of the side characters in this book, as well as in book 1, is one of the like protagonists in book 3, because I would love his romance. But I feel like this did a good job of continuing on with some of the plot points that were left open in book 1 and left off on a very interesting spot to continue on into book 3. So I'm really excited to continue with the series. I just didn't think this one was nearly as strong as book 1. Then we have a DNF, which is one of my least favorite books of the entire year, and that is Hunting Adeline by H.G. Carlton. I know that this series is so well loved. I know that this book is so well loved. There are like 4 people on Goodreads that have given this anything other than a 4 or 5 stars. And I DNF'd it at 75% and gave it a 1 star. I'm sorry, but I hated this book. I hated it. I hated every second of it. I kept pushing through, thinking that once we got out of the main situation, that it would get better. And it didn't. One, we sat in that situation for a like gratuitous amount of time. It was so unnecessary. We did not need 400 pages of sexual assaults. Like, that wasn't necessary. We didn't need that. And then once we did get out of that situation, I hated it just as much because I didn't feel like any care was taken with these themes, and it felt dark for the sake of darkness. And I was left feeling like there was no point to the series other than she wanted this to be shocking and dark. Like, I felt like that was the only point. And so I didn't like it. I ended up DNFing it. I have no idea if this is going to be an author that I'm ever going to read from again, because I really did not care for this. Another mildly disappointing book, I did still really like this, but that was Two Wrongs Make a Right by Chloe Leese. I ended up giving this 4 stars, so I don't want to start this off by leading anyone to believe that I dislike this book, but this was a 5 star for the majority of the book. I have so many animals in the room right now. Can you guys chill? But there is a third act breakup in here that I really hated it. I hated the third act breakup. And it isn't because it was a third act breakup. Like, I understand that that's how story arcs work. Like, you need conflict in order to complete your story arc. There needs to be a conclusion and a happily ever after. You need that. I get that. It had nothing to do with the fact that it existed. It was the actual reasoning behind the breakup that I hated. In this one, we were following these two characters who have this really terrible meet cute. They get off on the wrong foot. They really don't like each other when they first meet, but they have some meddling friends that keep pushing them together, and they decide that to get their friends off their back, they are going to fake date and then have a really epic breakup to get back with their friends. And of course, along the way, they fall in love, and it was so cute and so swoony and precious, and I loved these two together. There's amazing representation in here, like all of Chloe's books. There's neurodiversity rep as well as anxiety rep, and I really liked all of that. And then we get to the breakup scene at the end, and I just could not figure out where the logic was. Could not be found. It made no sense. I was left really angry about it. I didn't understand the point. I didn't understand the reasoning. It felt so contrived. It didn't work. I didn't like it. I didn't like that ending, but I did still love the rest of the book. So I gave this one a 4 overall. I just have very negative feelings about the end of this book. And then we're gonna get the two that I didn't read out of the way. First was Her Soul to Take by Harley Lebreau. After I read Hunting Adeline, or didn't finish reading it, I was a little burnt out on dark romances, and I was left feeling very negatively towards the genre, and so I took a bit of a break. I also read an absurd amount of books in October, and this one it didn't end up making it in because it is so long, and so I didn't end up getting to this one. I really want to read it still. I just don't know when it's going to happen, but hopefully in 2023, this one does get read. And then the other one I unfortunately did not read is Raven Song by TJ Klune. And look, when I made this TBR, I did not realize that the audiobook for this was taken down because this series got picked up, I think, by Tor. And so it's all being re-released. And I didn't know that the audiobook for this one isn't available. And it's not available until like July of next year. Which is it's a crime. It's a crime against readers. It's unfair. But like all the other books are still available on audio except for this one. And I was so mad. And I love the audiobooks for the series. I'm really hoping that they don't change like the narrator or anything because I love the narrator for the series. So once the audiobook comes back, I will read it. I loved the audiobook experience for Wolfsong, and I was unwilling to read it physically. I told myself multiple times to just read it physically, and every time I thought about it, I got mad about the fact that I couldn't listen to the audiobook, and so I never read it. I'm stubborn like that. And then the last books, a simultaneously read NDNF. It's the Peculiar Taste series. I said that I was going to read I think it's 6 books in the series. I read 3 of them, and I don't think I'm going to continue. I actually read 4. I'm going to pop up the 4 that I read right here, and then here's the 2 or 3 or whatever, how many that I didn't read. And I actually enjoyed the series from what I read. I feel absolutely zero draw to continue on, and I don't think I'm going to. If I do, it will be Halloween next year because these do take place like all surrounding Samhain. And so if I do pick this up again, it won't be until October of next year. I have like nothing to say about it. I thought it was fine. I think my favorite is the 4th one, Vixen's Deceit. It was just such a fun Halloween story. It takes place at a haunted house, and I loved this one, which is funny because this is, like, if you look on Goodreads, this is everybody's least favorite. But yeah, I feel no strong desire or pull to continue on. And so it's not going to be a priority. It's not going to really be on my TBR. If I do finish it, it's just going to end up being something that I pick up around the Halloween season. So that is all 10 books. Unfortunately, this one was not super successful. I didn't love almost anything. There was only 2 5-stars in this TBR, and while I loved them, everything else was just so disappointing that I'm left feeling kind of negatively about this season's TBR as a whole, even though I did have some favorites in here. I do have a new seasonal TBR coming later this week, so stay tuned for my winter TBR where I will talk about 10 more books that I'm super excited about. I think it's going to be a fantastic one. I have so many books on there that I'm really excited for. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in tomorrow's video. Bye!